You're listening to Symposium, a year-round conference in the arts, brought to you by Pipeline Artists.
We have a couple hundred people signed up for this event. Canada, Denver, Queens, Venice, LA, Northern California, Minnesota. All right, cool. Awesome.
Oh,
Brooklyn.
sweet.
Brooklyn is in the house.
Yeah.
Brooklyn's in the house. New York
Yes.
represents.
Harlem's in the house too. Awesome.
Ireland is in the house.
Wow.
There we go.
Ireland's up late tonight.
Exactly. Bless your heart. Okay, so I'm going to get started by giving these guys a little intro. This is Jimmy Palmiotti. I'm not sure where he is on your screen, but first of all, I should stop for a second. Official. Welcome to Unraveling the World of Comics and Graphic Novels. We're doing a panel tonight about everything to do with comics and graphic novels, and we're really excited to have Jimmy, Craig, and Spike here. Jimmy Palmiotti has an incredible background in gaming and producing and advertising, production, consulting, editorial. And he's a co-founder of such companies as Event Comics, Black Bull Media, Marvel Knights, a division of Marvel Comics, and the current Paper Films, where he is partner with his wife, Amanda Connor. Several of his contributions for both DC and Marvel can be found in major motion pictures and TV series, including Black Panther, Painkiller Jane, Daredevil, Suicide Squad, Harley Quinn animated series, Suicide Squad Random Acts of Violence, Dead Space, Downfall, and more. And Craig Weeden writes with Jimmy sometimes and on projects for film and TV, including their adaptations of Jimmy and Joe Quesada's graphic novel Painkiller Jane, and Jimmy and Garth Ennis's Back to Brooklyn. They also developed Jimmy's graphic novel Queen Crab into a TV series for Mila Media, and they're working on their third graphic novel. And Spike is our resident pipeline executive, aside from me. And Spike does a lot with our contest and development, and also has been a screenwriter for many, many years, worked in the TV industry for about, 10 years. And now he is writing comics. So, which we all encourage all of you to cross over to different mediums. So Spike is very, very passionate about this subject. And he approached Matt and our team at Pipeline about adding comics to our unpublished contest. So that is a factor of it. So we want to do everything we can to help you guys succeed and learn all that you can about this kind of medium and the uniqueness of it and how to navigate it. So Spike, would you like to start us off?
I'll just kind of start off with how I kind of got into the comic space, because I'll be perfectly honest, when I was a kid, never read a Batman or a Spider-Man comic. I watched the X-Men animated series, and I was definitely into the superhero world, but it really wasn't until I was in the industry for a while that I realized what excellent storytelling is happening in comics. So as Jeannie said, I was in the film and TV development space for a very long time. I was an assistant for 10 years in the film and TV stuff. And there was one time where a boss comes up to me and he throws this comic on my desk and he's like, "Hey, Spike, read this. I hear it's good. See if it could be a TV series." And I look at it, and within 8 pages, I'm like, this is impossible. It's, could never be realistic. It is way too out there and crazy, but I had to keep reading it to see what it was about so I could tell my boss why he was passing on it. That comic was Saga by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples, which I fell in love with this dang story, man. I mean, it was so deep. It was original. It was heartfelt. The characters were realistic. I mean, it was everything that I was missing out of film at the time, and everything that I got into the industry for, because I loved great storytelling like that. So that was my gateway drug into Lock and Key, into Snowpiercer, into all of these great original stories that were happening in the comic sphere, which is why I was like, hey man, there's some really exciting stuff happening here, which is really why I was like, Matt, Jeannie, we need to do something about this, because as someone who's writing comics, there's not really a path, like a tried, paved path for hey, I want to write comics. How do I get a job in the industry? What does the industry even look like? So I feel like Pipeline can kind of help with that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the experts, Jimmy and Craig, who work in this sphere, guys, tell us how you got started. Tell us how the industry is now. Kind of give us a lay of the land of how comics work from the big boys in Marvel and DC all the way down to the independents.
That's a giant question.
I know, right?
It's since I started and to now, it's completely different. So let's stay in the modern space, I guess. How I got started was I actually got started on the art end of things. I started as an inker and an artist in comics. And it wasn't until later on I started writing. But I already had my foot in the door with the company. So it was a little easier for me because I kind of knew everybody that was hiring. And my whole bunch of first jobs I did were things that were being canceled. There were books. I was working on Superboy and a whole bunch of other books that they kept offering me, hey, there's only 2 issues left. You want to do this? And I was like, sure, I'll try to make an impression in those 2 issues. And I think my first thing for DC was Deadpool, but Deadpool wasn't that popular at the time. And I did a run of Deadpool that actually worked out pretty well for me because I was able to launch out of that into other work. But the industry now, I mean, it's very different. Back when I started, it was 2 companies. It was Marvel and DC, and that was it. So it's what we call now Warner Brothers and Disney, right? But they're both all these characters are now corporately owned. So they're all owned by corporations that have shareholders and stockholders and expect to make money and all this kind of stuff. So it's a different field because now there's a whole lot of other companies and/or people putting out their own books, like I do, through Kickstarter, things like Kickstarter and Indiegogo and stuff like that, crowdfunding books. When I started, there was no internet. They give you an idea. And now there's an internet where you can post your work every day and show people your work every single day. When I started, I literally had to take the train from Brooklyn into Manhattan, go up to the Marvel offices, beg to show them my work, and hope for the best. But now, if you're a standout artist, you can post your artwork, and it gets discovered. And if you're a writer, well, that's a tougher route,
Right?
Because honestly, people don't read as much as we'd like to believe that they do. We read, but a lot of people don't. And a lot of these editors and offices, they want you to come in with having experience already or having major name somewhere else, whether you're a reporter, whether you write a novel, fiction, nonfiction. They want you to come in with a name because they want to bank on your name. So it's a little different now, but the good news is that if you're able to build up any kind of social media presence and have a bunch of followers with your work, you can actually crowdfund the book. And then when you crowdfund the book, there's nothing easier than to hand a finished book to an editor at a bigger company and say, here's my work, give it a read. Inside is my card, or here's a disc, and just check it out. So it's a different world, but in the same sense that you still have to work like a dog, like anything else, to get recognized. And I'm going to hand that over to Craig for your 2 cents, Craig.
Well, my route was entirely different, though I did read comics as a kid about 100 years ago. I transitioned into long novels, and I really got infatuated with, like all the big, thick Russian novels and all the classics and all these big, long books. As a matter of fact, I went off into, when I went to school, etc. I didn't end up an English major until I went to graduate school. But it was always compulsive reading. And underneath that reading, storytelling. And to me, that was the key thing, much like Spike was just mentioning, that something has to drive you. And it was always the good stories that pulled me along. And, I studied, I have an MA in English, MFA in creative writing. So I did all the traditional academic stuff, except I was totally academic as a person. I mean, I could not tolerate the idea of having a committee meeting to see if you can afford, an extra box of paper clips. It was like, you gotta be kidding me. And as my day job for many years, I was a residential contractor and I built homes. And if you notice that, if you ever seen plans, it all starts with a plan. And guess what? Screenplays, comics, graphic novels, they all start with a plan. So even though I was doing something completely different, there was an overlap. And it was like structure, my God. And then it's how does the site, the lot that you're building on determine what the house can be? And it's, well, what story you're telling? How does that determine what your structure is going to be? It was an incredible, almost mystical overlap there. And then, how I got into comics in this part of my life was as I was mentioning, teaching a course in screenwriting. And it was a workshop at night, mostly older students, and Jimmy showed up, took the course. Yeah. And he had, as it turned out, of like a one-page outline for the film of Painkiller Jane. And I remember once, probably early on, he said, well, what do you think of the title? Or I looked at it and said, Painkiller Jane, what a great title. And it comes back into my poetry background and focus on language, that if it's a great name, and he came up with it, but then he'd go deeper, and I'm sure he just did it naturally because of him being Jimmy and because it sounds so good. But if you look at it and listen to it, it's like Painkiller Jane, rhymes, strong on both ends, and you have the killer in the middle. Painkiller Jane. It's like a boom, boom. And it works perfect.
But the structure, like you were talking about, is what's really important. I mean, I had a debate with another pipeline exec at one point about how important structure is to a story. And I can tell you, for having worked in the development space for a really, really long time, I mean, that is really what kind of holds together a narrative like that. Jimmy, from your experience kind of working in some of those big companies, do you have any factors for, like, when someone had a new idea that they wanted to bring you, a new property that they wanted to get through, did you see any similarities in the submissions that kind of stood out to you versus the ones that maybe you immediately threw in the trash pile?
Well, so I'm offered work. I'm at the stage where I'm offered work. And whether I take it or not comes down to, is there anything I can relate to this character? What do they want? What do they fear? Can I find these things out about them? And I turned down a lot of work. At Marvel, I remember turning down Doctor Strange, where the editor literally said to me, nobody turns down Doctor Strange. And I just said, I don't think the character is a challenge for me because of magic, no matter how much, bad things are going on, he goes bibbly boo and everything's the same. And I said, I'm not that guy. I can't relate to this character. And I have to find a thing that I relate to. I mean, with something like Painkiller Jane, what Craig was talking about, everything, these I'm basing on like my experience, right? Even though it's a female character and everything, it's a lot of it's based on me growing up in Brooklyn. I was in a crime area, and it was kind of like easy to write, right? It's sort of like writing my neighborhood. But when I'm offered stuff like Superman, Batman, X-Men, and Wolverine and stuff like that, I'm trying to find a thing that I find interesting in the character. And also what I find unique about the character, because obviously I'm getting hired to have a different voice on this book, right? Otherwise, they would have kept the person before. So I'm getting hired to find. So with a character like Harley Quinn, for an example, when they offered Harley Quinn to Amanda and I, it was a canceled character. The book was canceled. She was a killer. She was a Joker's girlfriend. And when they offered it to us, I was like, but what do I find interesting about this character? And I was like, where does she live? And they're like, well, I don't know, Gotham. And I'm like, what does she do when she's not, being the doctor and she's not being the Joker's girlfriend? And in order for us to take the book, I asked them if we can have them break up, because I didn't want to write a character that was like in an abusive relationship. There was just no way for me to relate, to empower somebody that's in that position. So we took her out of that position. We had to break up with the Joker. And then we also felt like, well, this is a character that she's almost a supporting character to Batman. And in order for me to blow up this character, I need to take her out of her safe zone, which is Gotham. And we brought it back to where she originally was written from, which was by Paul Dini. Paul Dini originally had the character come from Brooklyn. And I said, okay, I'm not Canarsie, Brooklyn. And I said, I'm not going to bring it back to Canarsie because that's where parents live. But where would a wild girl like this want to live? And I said, how about Coney Island? It's almost like a circus 24/7. And so these little obvious things you find, and you add to the character. And sometimes it's so easy, like it's such an obvious thing. And then for Harley, 2 years later, it's the #1 best-selling comic. They're making a movie. They get, all of a sudden we hit on something. And my wife hit on something. She said, no woman wears the same outfit twice. So Amanda kept drawing Harley in different outfits, which, was a lot of people cosplaying really love that because they can do their own version of Harley.
Right.
But a lot of times it's just what you can look at in the job and say, can I bring something original and new to this? Because if I'm going to write the same old thing, I really have no interest in doing it, to be honest with you. I'd rather do something else for a living. I feel like I'm put here to kind of put my spin on things, whether they work or not. And failing is like a huge part of this, learning that something doesn't work early on in my career has helped me fine tune what I do now. So I can go on and on about failing.
And and also too, though, you seem to really be drawn to writing strong women.
Yes, that's all I know is strong women. I've been lucky between my mom and my wife and my friends. They're all independent women, and I got to be honest. Like when I first started, and this is like in the 70s, 80s, the female characters were not that popular, and I felt like that shouldn't be the way, and especially comics are a visual medium. So I'm a guy. Nothing's more beautiful than looking at a woman. So, for me, it's just like, okay, but there's more than the beauty. What is it that makes this person tick? And why is Jane and Harley completely different characters? Why are they, what is it about them that I find interesting and yet they're nothing alike on some levels? And it's funny because when I was, when I moved down here to Florida, I was living in New York most of my life. When I moved down to Florida, I was doing screenwriting work. I was doing work, but I wanted to take a class. Sort of like I just felt like I needed to go back to school a little bit and to learn the basics and to find somebody to kind of work with in a classroom setting. Even though I already wrote an animated movie and a whole bunch of other things that got published and made, some cartoons I did and video games I've written and everything. But I said they had a night class near me. And that's where I met Craig. I dragged Craig kicking and screaming into my world of comics. But I felt even though I was making a living and doing this, I still felt I needed some guidance and I needed some wrangling and I needed my brain to be in a learning setting. And I went to Craig's class. I took Craig's night class, and we became friends and worked together afterwards. But people kept going to me, but you're already working, you're already doing everything. And I said, yeah, but the brain needs stimulation outside of just sitting in my house and just, I write everywhere, but I type at home, right? That's what I always say with writing. I type at home, but I write everywhere every day. But I just needed that setting because I felt like as much as I need to learn, I have to learn. I just felt like I have so much to learn. And every writer is going to feel this. And if you don't feel this, you're out of your mind or you shouldn't be a writer, is that your next thing is going to be better. And that's another thing. Because anybody who sits there and tells me this is my greatest book and this is the best thing I ever did, I always laugh. I always go, oh boy, this is going to suck.
I don't know if I'd go quite that far, but I think you're right on with that. It was like everything you write is going to get better because you're going to learn something from that experience. Jimmy, you said so much interesting stuff in that little spiel right there. I can hardly remember it all. I want to start with.
I like the word spiel, by the way.
There you go. I want to start with when you were reinventing Harley Quinn, because I think this is so interesting. Let's talk about the process for when you're working for one of these big companies and you have this idea to reinvent this character. How's the process of working with the editors to actually get those ideas and implement them in the comic? And maybe even talk about, if you can, maybe how it started, how it originally was versus how it has changed now and how that process goes now. I think that'd be really fascinating.
Sure. So Harley Quinn, the character was created in the Batman animated series. So it actually existed in an animated series before it ever made it to a comic book. And It was created by Bruce Timm and Paul Dini, who are both exceptional writers and artists alike. And that was many, many years ago. And then eventually it had a comic book series or two that came out, and it did okay for a while, but the character didn't catch on, I guess, as much as the animated series character. And again, her role was always the Joker's girlfriend. So the Joker was always slapping her around. She would always, stand up to him, and he'd beat her down. And it was like she was like the sidekick to Joker that took a lot of beatings and but was also strong in a sense too. But she just the character itself was, it was a different type of character, and it was, for its time, it served the purpose. Being Joker's girlfriend made complete sense because Joker's a jerk. Let's be honest, he's a bad guy and a jerk. And when I was offered Amanda and I were offered the book, it was Dan DiDio, who was the editor-in-chief of the company. We were at a retailers convention in Orlando where the heads of, like the editor-in-chief of DC Comics would go all over the United States and meet with retailers and ask them what they think they should be publishing to get a feel of, because the retailers, obviously they're on the ground floor. They know who comes in the store and what they're looking for. And one of the guys told Dan, he said, you should bring back Harley Quinn. That was your like Deadpool in a way. And he just turned to me and said, you want to write, you and Amanda want to write and do Harley? And I said, let me talk to Amanda. I said, I don't know much about the character other than what I've seen in the animated series, because I didn't read the comics. And I only worked on the character once before, which was in the animated game. I did one of the Injustice, was the first Injustice game, was a game I co-wrote, and she was in it. So when we got the job, I just looked at what Amanda and I could do that's different, and we pitched it. And Dan was really great. He said, look, it's not going to last past six or eight issues. So do whatever you want, because at this point we don't think it's gonna matter. Like, the character was not thought of as something that was a popular character. And when somebody tells you do whatever you want, there's a lot of freedom there. Yeah. And we did everything from redesign her to change her background. And it was just, I think the smart thing for Dan was that he just trusted us. Mm-hmm. And he knew the way Amanda and I were. He knew us for years. So he knew we would bring something to it that other people weren't bringing to the character. And that kind of trust, paid off for him. Also, when I did a character called Jonah Hex, which is a Western, it was the same kind of thing. He knew how much I loved Westerns. He knew I was vying for that character forever to write it. So when he gave me the gig, he was just like, okay, now's your time to shine. But it's a trust I had to earn over 20-something years. Because a lot of the time I was given characters that were not great and didn't have story. And I would try to make them more interesting, but they just didn't catch on. So you learn eventually in a career, people remember most of your successes and they forget all the failures over time. That's just the way it works.
My mind is just blown by the fact that you were given a blank slate for what has become this iconic character, which then has obviously, like someone saying, oh, Harley Quinn's only going to last 6 or 8 issues. I mean, like, you say that now and it's like you laugh at them, because clearly this is one of like the most popular comic book characters ever. So that is just absolutely wild to me.
Yeah, I think, like you don't know what, look, right. Nobody knows what the next thing is going to be, right? Otherwise we'd be investing all of our money into these things. It's just that sometimes it's the right creators at the right time. Yeah, come in with the right thing. I mean, we've had it. There's a guy named Frank Miller that got hired, and when you put him on a couple of things, this stuff went through the roof. It's sometimes Frank Miller on Batman and Daredevil makes complete sense. Yeah, but Frank did a lot of other books that were okay before that. It's just, again, it's just the luck, and also I think it's the level of the life you live. Because I always tell people, you can read all you want and you can do, but you have to travel, fall in love, and have your heart broken in order to understand characters. Mm-hmm. It's not always about the written page. Yeah. You have to actually live a life and apply it to your work.
I completely.
It's so important.
And I think the other thing that you said that really important, and sorry to cut you off, Jeannie, but you know, the relationship that you had with this editor, for him that's just to turn to you on the fly and say, hey, I trust you enough to give you this character, and then let you kind of run with it. I mean, that's what I think people really need to take away from this is like in the creative field, if you want to have a career, you need to build relationships with people, and those relationships need to last for years and decades and so on and so forth.
I give you a piece of advice. Put a Post-it on your computer. And if you're on social media and you feel the urge to say anything negative, don't. Tell it to your dog.
Yeah.
Open your window and yell at your neighborhood. You know, yell at your dinner. But don't go online bad-mouthing people or films or directors, because eventually you might meet them one day and they remember that stuff. Boy, they remember. Oh my God, people have the memory for all the wrong things. I got to tell you.
It's a crazy coincidence. I just turned in an article to Jeannie for Pipeline Artist about that very topic today.
There you go.
Yeah, that's what I was going to tell you. But I want to get to a couple of the questions of the people in the audience, because we've got a lot of people who are just starting writing comics or maybe adapting a screenplay into a comic, wanting to know about that, you know, process, how it's different than screenwriting, how to take that script and turn it into a comic or a graphic novel, and also about breaking in. So Josh asked, what is the best way to turn a screenplay into a graphic novel, assuming the content makes sense? Like, have you adapted any scripts into novels, or into graphic novels or comics, or are you usually writing them like fresh? New idea.
I'm going to point this to Craig, because Craig, Killing Time in America, we wrote first, right?
Yeah, Killing Time in America, we wrote as a screenplay first.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then it said, you know, this is really interesting. Maybe we can adapt it. And we did. And I think what you have to do, keep in mind, is number one, you got to live off your visuals, telling your story. And if you're writing a screenplay, I always say you should be able to shut off the sound and the visuals will tell your story. And of course, a comic or a graphic novel is so highly visual, and it's sequential art, and you've got to work on condensing. Might have 100 and 110 pages. And if you're going to do a comic, you know, you've got 22 pages. So what do we leave out? And how do we leave it out? If you look at a comic, typically you have, we'll just say roughly between 4 and 6 panels on a page. And the space between the panels is called the gutter. And when you're condensing your screenplay into a page with panels, it's what can I leave out? What can go in the gutter? Sequential art. You know, if you have someone falling off the roof of a building, do you have to spend all that time and all that panel space showing them getting closer and closer and closer to the ground? Or do they fall off the building, scream, and then splat? Everybody will know what happened. They went all the way to the bottom. It's what can you leave out? So now you have to find out what's important. And when you're doing that for the adaptation, you know, either direction. I mean, when we did Killing Time in America, we had more room, so to speak. We could develop the characters a little differently. To keep it in mind, going back and forth, is what can you leave out and what can you put in the gutter? If it's not essential, can you leave it? If it's essential, boom, it's got to be there. One big difference, too, is in screenwriting, they say, you know, don't give camera directions, or you have to learn how to cheat them in there. So you're telling the director what to do without it being a screen direction. If you're writing a comic book, you are the director. When you're writing that script, you're putting whoever it is in the foreground. Something is going on in the background. That's all directing, but it's part of your storytelling.
Yeah, and adapting a screenplay, because when we go into screenplays, when we write screenplays, we're not telling the director where to put the camera unless it's a key thing to the story. Otherwise, we have to hang back, you know. And it's for me, it was tough to know that, because when I write, I see everything. I see that, you know, it's like a VR. I see every room and every shadow and every staircase and where they go and everything. But the when you're adapting that screenplay to a comic book panel or a comic book page, yeah, you have to say, this is a busy street. It's maybe like 5 o'clock at night, so the shadows are long on the ground going up the sides of the wall. It's extreme lighting. You have to do everything, light, everything you would do in a film except for sound, obviously. Although I would recommend some people to put on a soundtrack when I was doing it. But the adaptation takes on another life. And again, where both mediums are a medium where we don't have to worry about budget. I can say 5,000 men on horseback come over a hill, and it's an easy thing in a script. When you do it in a comic, somebody has to draw those horses coming over the hill.
I bet they love you for that one.
Oh, they do the cheats. We call it silhouettes, and one guy in the front screaming, and then we just see rows of little dots in the background. There's a lot of cheats, but again, adapting it is a little different because when a screenplay, usually a page is a minute, right? We look at 90 pages, maybe an hour and a half, whatever. The comics, you can take shortcuts to things. We can bounce around. We can bounce from place to place. Flashbacks are just done with color codes. We can all of a sudden, the flashback is a sepia, so we know once we establish it, there's little shortcuts we can do. But again, adapting it into a graphic novel, a screenplay into a graphic novel, is a great way to get the studios who have problems reading, or an agent who doesn't have the time to do anything, to actually look at something, because people can read a comic pretty quickly. And there's a thing we always laugh about in comics. It's like word balloon has a little arrow that points to the head. Usually people read it, look at the head, and then go to the next word balloon, and they can read comics very quickly. Now, when you love comics, you read them slowly because you're looking at the background and looking at the shading. You're looking at everything. But people read comics quicker, so it's a good tool, and it's why a lot of film studios go after comic books, because they see the visuals already represented for them. There's no art direction. Or, an art director can take it and they're going to do their own thing. But in a case like Harley, as an example, they looked at the comics and they took a lot of what James Gunn put into the second Suicide Squad were like actual panels from our comics that we did,
Wow.
So it's a lot of shorthand that's being done. But again, back to the question, screenplay to comic, yeah, it's a process to do, but it can be done. It's just a different way of writing. It is a better and easier tool to sell your thing because it's shorter. But I would almost say, if you really have a great idea, a pitch document is even a shorter way of doing it. And that could be another conversation for another day. As you know, Spike, that's a whole nother thing,
And the funny thing is, we had a symposium last night with Doug Richardson about adaptation. And it's so funny because one of the things he said to the authors in the group, there were screenwriters and authors there. To the authors, he said, nobody in Hollywood likes to read, so adapt your book into a screenplay because then they'll be more likely to read that. So then I guess you should also adapt your book into a screenplay and a comic or graphic novel. It's really funny.
It's going to be how it lands, right? Because
it's like the funnel.
So most people are going to write a book, and then they have to find a publisher, and then you have to hope you have a million cousins that recommend the books, or a million friends that recommend the books, and people buy it. And this is a business where there are so many people doing it. Everyone's fighting for the same couple of inches. Those books you see at the airport, they went in major battles to get that spot in that thing. And then it becomes name recognition, right? So the airport is who's going to fly off the shelves the most? And so it's Stephen King or anybody like that. So so most people writing novels and stuff, it's basically going to go to an audience that's either you have a social media presence, if it's about horses, then you have people that love horses are going to read that book. But it's really, really, really hard to do. And then they get somebody interested in it as far as a movie or TV, they don't really read screenplays raw. They really don't. I mean, they tell you they do, but my experience has been, unless you're a nephew of somebody in Hollywood or related to them, or some actor you're friends with walks in your screenplay, most of the time they don't even look at stuff. They go back to the same people. But with graphic novels, it tends to be, some come out in stores and people find them and discover them. And I found that when we were in Los Angeles, there used to be a couple of comic shops in Los Angeles where all these assistants to producers, and they would go to comic shop every Wednesday, and the comic shop would put the books that they think would make good movies on a shelf because they know these guys were going to come looking for it. And that doesn't even happen anymore that much. So again, everything's changing. My advice to everyone is write the best thing of whatever thing you're writing. Don't worry about what they're going to do in a movie because they'll change it anyway. Right. Don't worry about, like I said, write the thing truest to what you're writing.
Yeah.
And that's how it's going to make the most impact with whoever you give it to.
Well, and I can jump into what you're talking about there, Jimmy, because I recently was in the development sphere. I mean, I was a development assistant for 10 years working on the movie side and the TV side. So trust me, we do read screenplays, but most of the stuff that we read gets recommended by somebody else. It's almost always an agent or a manager sends it in, or like you said, somebody knows a guy who's able to get to the right hands and it's able to come in that way. But in my experience, the things that people are looking for right now, Hollywood doesn't want great screenplays. What they want are guaranteed eyeballs on their product. What they want is they want something that they can say, all right, we've got this property, Painkiller Jane. It has sold 500,000 copies. We can then put that into our algorithm, say that 300,000 of those fans are going to watch the movie. That puts us at this much profit margin already. We can start to already project how much money this is going to make. Whereas if you come in with a naked screenplay, you've really got nothing. I mean, all you've got is like, I've got a great story, and then that's it. So that's where I think a lot of people trying to get in the front door of Hollywood are struggling because that's not what Hollywood wants now, which is why I agree, turn your idea into something that they want, either a novel or a graphic novel, something else that can kind of gain some popularity and get some traction. And if you can get a fan base going, then all of a sudden Hollywood's going to say, hey, I want that now. There was a question in the Q&A I want to address from Dustin. What is an acceptable number of panels for a standard non-splashy comic page? So I want to talk about the first comic script I ever wrote. This was like 2 or 3 years ago. I had no idea what I was doing. I had read screenplays for 10 to 12 years. I had, written a couple screenplays for fun, but I'd never written the comic script. You know what I did? I knew what I wanted my comic to be like. I wanted my comic to be like Saga by Brian and Fiona. So I literally used like the hardcover edition of Saga Volume 1 as my textbook. If I was like, how many panels should I have? I would go through and I'd say, how many panels does Brian use? All right, on average, it's between 3 and 6. He never has more than 6 on a page. Every now and then he'll have a 1, and it's usually like a left-hand page when he wants like a splash page surprise. But I think that you can actually answer that question by going through the comics that you want your comic to look like and using those as your resource. What are the creators that I want to emulate doing? And then try to, I don't want to say copy them, but use them as like a basis for like, all right, this is what these guys are doing. Let me work within their parameters and then change it whenever I think necessary. Do you guys have any other advice about that?
Absolutely. I mean, Alan Moore, obviously, The Watchmen, it was a 9-panel grid. So there was 9 panels on each page. It comes down to personal preference. Nobody sits there because we know when we're writing it, we know how much dialogue is going to be there. So you don't want the person in the panel to be like this, and it's a ton of dialogue above them. Right. You have to kind of visualize what's being said. Also, how important the thing that's being drawn is to the story and how clear it is. Right. So clarity in storytelling is a key part of that. There's no set amount of panels because the guys like Jim Starlin, who I love, did 15 panels. He did small panels that showed actions. Some people will do 2 or 4. The average, I would say, is 6 or 7. But there's no such thing as I'm sure if you with Saga, I'm sure if you told Brian that he'd be laughing and going, "Oh, I didn't even realize I do that."
I hope to one day tell him that.
Yeah, I mean, Brian, he's a buddy of mine. So, I'm sure he's not even thinking of it. He's just thinking of how do I get it all to fit in the pages I have. Mm-hmm. And that has a lot to do with it. Also, the quality of the artwork is going to make it easier or harder for you. If a person doesn't have clarity with their drawing, you might have to spend a half a page explaining what the hell we're seeing. And so it is a marrying of these 2 art forms. And that's why we say no creator on comic is more important than the other one. The artist and the writer are equally important on a comic book. Okay.
What made you want to switch over from illustrating to writing?
The illustrating didn't pay very well. It was a lot more hours. And it just didn't pay very well. Plus, I've been a frustrated writer and a storyteller forever, and I just wanted to switch gears. I just wanted to.
Yeah.
I think I had a job came in at DC that I was not crazy about doing, and I threw it back in the FedEx box to the editor and told him I'm officially not drawing anymore. I just want to write. It was like some crazy evening. I just had this thing like, that's it, I'm done, and I switched gears. But it's just a different thing. It's really writers can write 3 books a month, 3 comics a month. An artist can only draw 1. And at the time I was taking care of my mom and had bills and stuff. I needed to make more money. That was part of it. And the other part is I always wanted to create my own thing. So it made sense to start writing.
And Craig, you were about to say something and I cut you off. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, for anybody starting out looking, definitely just go look at a lot of comic books and at the panels. Don't even read the story. Just look at the panels. I mean, they're all different shapes. They're all some are tilted, some are just rectangular. Sometimes you'll have 5 or 6, the whole width of the page, different widths, but different heights, but the widths are all the same. You have to expose yourself to what's out there. If you're just getting started, don't think Go to a comic book shop, go online, and just look at the panels, and you'll say, "Oh my God!"
Yeah, buy my books.
Buy Jimmy's books.
That's right.
Go to paperfilms.com and you can get your education right there.
Yeah.
Also,
we will link to your books in the recording email.
Buy my Kickstarter. It's funny because the Kickstarter I have up, Fantasema, right now, which Craig and I worked on. We decided to do it completely linear, so no angled panels. A lot of comics do angles to show action and stuff like that. But I find that the clarity of storytelling is a little tougher, and people who don't read comics all the time have a problem following which way the eye travels on a page. So I like to be linear, almost like a film. When we're writing a script, we'll say widescreen, which means from end to end and narrow, or splash, which means big, or split screen. There's all kind of terminology that also applies to film. And I would say anybody writing that wants to go into that should be doing a lot of research on how to direct, because I think it's underrated how much when you're writing a comic book and when you're writing something, you have to be the director too. You have to see everything. You have to live in that space. You have to see the lighting. You have to smell the air. You have to do everything. When I'm visualizing something, Craig and I, we talk about it all the time. We see the room. We see the limitations of the room. If there's a fight scene in an elevator, obviously there's limitations of the space in an elevator. So the actions going on have to be limited to how far an elbow can go back to throw a punch. And this has everything to do with changes the story that's happening. And you have to be aware of that with everything. So with comic book storytelling, when you're writing seasons, when you write time, usually in every panel you write, where are they, establishing shot, time of day. Sometimes we write for the colorist. So he said, I'd like this to be sepias. I want this to break into color when we get to this place. And that's all part of directing. It's all part of being a director. So any books you can read on directing, any classes you can take with directing, it is going to help your writing in so many ways. And especially if you're screenwriting, it's going to make a world of a difference.
Well, it's about
I think that's great.
Right? Yeah, like you're trying to create something, and you need to have a vision of what you want. But the difference between this and screenwriting is, in screenwriting, it's all you. In this, it's a collaborative medium. I mean, I've tried to get some comic books made, and just working with an artist and having to communicate what I want versus what they can draw, what they enjoy drawing, what they hate drawing. I mean, you don't want to ask somebody, hey, you hate drawing tech stuff. Well, this is all takes place on a spaceship. You're going to hate your life while you draw this comic. Can you talk a little bit about the collaborative process? And Darren in the Q&A asked, what's the difference in collaborative processes across mediums, giving your script to a comic artist versus TV film director versus video game? You kind of touched on this a little bit, but can you kind of talk to us about that whole thing?
Sure. I mean, I do have a conversation with my artists about what they like to draw and what they don't like to draw, to right away out of the gate, to make sure they're the right matchup for me. I had a guy, Mark Texera, a fantastic artist. I wanted to put him on Jonah Hex, but he told me specifically, he said, can you make it so he's not on a horse? And I'm like, it is a Western, you know, and he rides a horse. And I realized that's not the guy for me. Okay. Brilliant artist, but he said it out of the gate. I was like, I respect that. You don't want to draw horses.
Yeah.
You're not going to get that gig. A lot of times, when we're creating something from scratch, I like to speak with the artist and say, what is something you like to draw? And they throw 3 or 4 genres at me, and then I find the story in there because I want to collaborate. I want to make sure we're both going to own a piece of this thing. So let's, I want to know what you want to draw, what you're going to spend the next 3 months working on. I want to make sure it's something you want to draw. But that's not always the case because a lot of times, you have to take on gigs and, you don't have a choice. And people tell me, oh, I hate to draw buildings. And I'm like, dude, I said, you want to draw Batman? You're going to have to draw buildings. That city's just another character in the story. You're going to have to do it.
Yeah.
And again, if you're a writer and you live in the country and you've never been to a city and you want to write about cities, I'm guaranteeing you should get on a bus or a car and go to a city and spend a good long weekend. A rowdy weekend, as I like to say, go out there and get in trouble a little bit. This is all part of the writing process. And look, you could write sci-fi and never live on Mars. I get that. But when you're writing something about a place where people know, make sure you know more than they do about it. Because nothing is worse than when I pick up a book or watch a movie about Brooklyn and I say, well, that's Toronto. It's like right away my brain shuts off. Or something doesn't ring true. I see a lot of, because I'm Italian, I see a lot of movies where it's not Italian people writing Italians. And I call it the pizza box writing. They're writing the guy on the pizza box. It's not actually what an Italian family is. Or they're writing it only based on their experience from watching a movie, which is
Godfather.
Godfather, Saturday Night Fever, anything like that. It's every cliche in the book. It's probably the quickest way to get your work thrown out is that you don't have this authenticness to your work. And Spike, I lost track of the question, but
I think you answered
thing
it.
about choosing the artist on our most recent graphic novel, Fantasima. Most of it is set in Chile, and the artist Pierre Brito was born in Uruguay, grew up in Argentina, and now lives in Amsterdam. But he brought to the project his South American background, sensibility, color palette, and it's just incredible art. I feel so fortunate that Jimmy knew Pierre and it all just came together because it's a total wow.
Yeah,
and so
he brought something to that book that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise from somebody else. And I'm sure every director says that about when their actor wins Best Picture. It's the same kind of thing. It's like the right person for the right role.
Since we're on the
I want to
topic-
just hold on 1 second, Spike.
Yeah,
I want to, because we were talking about collaboration and all that. I want to just say to the audience, some of you are dropping in links because you're looking for illustrators or writers, whatever, but you're sending them just to us. Make sure you click everyone so the rest of them can see it. Because maybe you guys can like create something over there. But people were asking about like, how do you, like, somebody new, like, like Spike looking for an artist. How do people find those? And maybe Spike can also speak to that too, because you guys have this network and people, so you have people you can call. But if you don't know anybody, you've written this graphic novel or comic and you want to try to find a really good illustrator, maybe also give some tips about like red flags, like what makes you say
I got answers
no.
Yeah. So I mean, out of the gate, obviously, if you're going to hire an artist, you better be ready to pay them. Okay. And you don't pay them up front. You pay them as they hand in each page or every couple of pages. You just pay them as they go along. And if they don't finish a job, you have to have a contract. So you have to write up a contract. If they don't finish a job, you get some of your money back, whatever. You have to protect yourself like any other job. You have to protect yourself. You also have to state rights issues, meaning, is this a work for hire? Meaning, am I hiring this person just to draw my book, but they don't own anything? Or is it a creator shared? So all of a sudden, I'm going to give you a percentage. You're going to be okay with that percentage or not. Or we're going to split it right down the middle, but I'm going to control the media rights. There's all these things that you really need lawyers in your life You do, and they are worth every penny. Trust me, they're worth every penny, because no lawyer should be taking that long on writing a contract for you, especially since they work off a blueprint contract mostly for publishing and for film. Publishers give you a contract, and it's your job to rip it apart. Okay, if you just sign it and you're so happy you just sign it like you're just insanely happy, usually you're gonna get screwed down the line, or there's no rights reversion in it, or something like that happens. So you gotta get an experienced lawyer. There are publishing lawyers. You look in the phone book, you can find them. And again, this comes down to, and what some people are asking about, is owning your IP, your intellectual property.
Mm-hmm.
So when you create something that's brand new and it's yours, you have to tell the people, hey, this is work for hire gig, this is what you're getting paid, or I'm going to pay you less, but I'm going to give you 20% of the character. These are all things that have everything to do with the IP, because as Spike can tell you, there's nothing worse when he's interested in a property and then 15 people own it. And there's a guy that's insisting he's a producer. And there's another guy who said, well, I put the money into it and I own that. There's nothing that gets a deal killed quicker than that. And for what Craig and I do, we own the IP. So they come right to us. I said, yeah, we own 100% of the IP. You're making a deal with two people. That's a dream. That's a dream to do.
Clean chain of title is really nice to have. And
yeah,
I hope that everyone in the chat saw me nodding along with everything that Jimmy said, because everything he said is a mistake that I personally have made trying to get my first comic off the ground.
I've made so many mistakes. There's a company that has a property of mine that's in bankruptcy that I probably will not get my hands on while I'm alive, because it's so much red tape. But if you're a one idea person, that might make you jump off a roof. But I've never been a one idea person. So I just have to say, okay, see that character later. Well, and wait till something happens,
Let me very quickly go through my horror stories with trying to do this, just so everyone else in here will never repeat the same mistakes that I made. Because when I was trying to get my first comic made, I found my guy on Reddit. There's subreddits just like Hungry Artists or Comic Book Creators Collaborate or whatever. And I found a guy who was extremely talented. He was from Brazil. His rates were very good with the currency exchange that we had in America. And I didn't have that much money, but I was like, I can afford this guy. So sent him the script. He was all down to do it. And I made the first mistake that Jimmy said not to do. I gave him half up front. I gave him like $1,800. And it started off fine. It started out him sending work pretty regularly. He would send me pencils of a page, and then he would send, he would send sketches and then pencils, and then he would ink it, and then he would do the next page and the next page. But after, a little bit, he would slow down, and I'd have to start checking in on him. And that's when you realize you have to start being not only a creator, but you have to be a manager and a boss, because you've hired this person to really work for you to create this thing that you want. And so you have to tell them, hey man, what's going on? Like, why have I only gotten one page this month when last month you did like 10? Like, what's going on here? And he would come back with, oh, I'm so sorry, my dad's sick, and oh, my dog is just died, and there was a hole in my roof and all that. And it's just like, you want to be empathetic to whatever the problems are going on with here, but at the same time, you're the one who's paying and not getting what you want. And so you're trying to like manage a relationship and keep it going. And eventually this guy just dropped out because he was like, man, I'm sorry, I got to get surgery on my wrist. I can't draw. And I lost that $1,800. He delivered 11 inked pages, which I can never use. I didn't deliver him all the money, thank God, but it was still like a really bad lesson. I also, I hate to say this, but after that, I was so triggered. I was so angry by the fact that this hadn't worked. I went out, I found another group on Facebook of comic artists seeking work, found a guy, thought it was good, gave him the script, he loved it. Gave him half up front. He just straight up scammed me. Like 2 days later, he was like, oh man, my dog's been in the hospital and I have to pay like $30,000 in fees. So I'm gonna have to take like 10 jobs ahead of you to like pay that off. And I was like, no, bro, like give me my money back. And I lost $1,400 that way. So
I
for
think
everyone
maybe
here,
the first question you should ask the next illustrator, do you have a dog?
no,
That's it. You have a dog, a mother, an aunt, a grandmother. Is anyone in your family alive that could die at any moment?
The first question I'm asking the next person is, are you willing to sign a contract? And are you willing to get paid pages at a time? Because I am not giving $1,500 of my dollars to anyone else. Like, you want to trust people. You want to believe in the good.
Sure.
This is a business transaction at the end of the day.
Out of the gate, you ask them, can I see the other books you've done? That's the first one. Okay.
Absolutely.
Number one, show me the other books again. 2, can you give me the emails of a couple of people you worked with? I want to make
Yes.
sure. I want to make sure that you get the work in. 3, I'm going to pay you as the pages go. Now, realistically, they can also bail halfway through a gig. Like you said, you have 18 pages of a book, right?
I have 11 pages. Yeah.
11 pages. Do you have the original art?
Yeah. No, I have digital scans.
Digital. Okay. So, I mean, you can always use it one day if you have to, right?
Yeah.
You just have to find an artist that draws like them.
Yeah.
But there's so many pitfalls. That's why we try to go with people that are experienced. When I built up my name, now if you screw me, you're doomed because I have a big mouth. And I'll make sure. Actually, I saw somebody pop on a chart saying I think it was Age Haynes said I met someone with Scout Comics located in Florida. Age, I'm going to recommend that you read a little bit today about the news about them. At least do your research before you do business with them, because I read some stuff today that they're having some money issues or something. I just wanted to give you a heads up because I'd be an idiot if I didn't say anything. So do a little research on them. They might be working it out, but an internet search with the name of the company doesn't hurt to do, and see if there's anybody talking about them. I always say, put a little search on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it this week, and put the company and see what pops up. And as far as artists, yeah, I mean, there's 1,000 ways to get screwed because you're dealing with artists that the illustrators are very creative people. They also lean towards depression. They're overworked because it's a lot of work. So you're dealing with unstable molecules out of the gate, okay? So there's a tendency of people always say, oh, you always use those 6 people. And I'm like, yes. And
they're reliable.
I said, and I'm not going to let anybody else get them because, so my thing is, it takes time to do that. But a good sign is somebody shows you like 10 books they've done, because that means they actually can finish things. So that's another one I would recommend out of the gate,
And real quick to answer Dustin's question, anyone I can use near Pennsylvania for contracts, just look up IP lawyers. I mean, they will have like Jimmy said, a blank, like a contract that they use that they can then adjust to whatever you need them to do. I would say that's how I got my contract on that I use now.
Okay, and the Age Haynes, like I said, I'm not saying anything good or bad. I'm saying just do your research, because I see you're a semi-finalist for a contest they have. That's great. Congratulations on that. So I'm just saying, with anybody or anything you're going to work with, do your research. Companies, publishers. What I love about the internet, people love to complain. So, and I don't take all of it. I take it with a grain of salt. But if you start seeing 100 different people complaining about, let's say, an artist you hire, the tendency is to stay away from that person. It's common sense, but it's not, because who would think of doing that unless Spike, unless you had that happen to you, you wouldn't even think of half of the stuff you're thinking. Right. So you actually learned some good lessons that cost you maybe $2,800. Yeah, but there were some good lessons there.
And listen, at the
cheaper
very
than an MFA.
At the very beginning, I was wondering, do I even use a contract? Is this so informal? Like, is that going to scare people off? Is that standard? I didn't know what I didn't know. Now I've made the mistake to where I will never make that mistake again. It's like, you want to be the cool boss until you get burned. And then all of a sudden you're like, no, I understand why people have bosses who are hard-nosed, because if you're paying for a service, you want to make sure that you get it. And a lot of times I think if you give people a contract, that's going to scare away the scammers, because they're going to be like, oh crap, I got to give information now. I have to actually like put my name on something. Now there's a paper trail to like prove that I can't quite do this.
Right. I'm going to say, let's readjust your brain to a contract is a sign of respect.
Yes.
So when you get a contract, that's the person respecting you. So let's rework the brain. People who want to work with each other are not afraid of contracts. Okay. They're afraid of that they're going to miss something in the contract, or they're, they don't understand the contract. But when you're a freelancer and you get one, that's a sign of, I'm going to actually work, because this is serious business. This is a business, and they give me a contract. So it's a good sign. But again, a lawyer, no matter who or where they are, should come, like the paperclip, should always come with the contract.
Yeah. Now, I have a question for both of you. Since we're talking about people having negative experiences with artists, I think it would be remiss if we didn't cover the topic of AI generated art. It's what everyone's talking about now. It's hitting the airwaves. It's, threatening a lot of people in this industry. I mean, a lot of the comic book groups that I'm on, the creator groups, are talking a lot about this. So as you guys who are comic book creators, what are your feelings on AI art, possibly using AI art? Is that just like an absolute no-go? I would love to hear from both of you guys, like just how you feel about the space and where you think that it might impact comics moving forward, making comics specifically.
I think that people that, I think AI is only going to get better and sharper. The problem I have with it is it steals people's styles. So I have to like put a blocker for my wife's name on a whole bunch of AI sites. I have to put in a request for them not to sample her artwork. There's a reason the biggest AI companies in the United States are asking the government to regulate them. Okay, so I don't know if you know that they approach the government to regulate their companies. Think really hard about that. $1 billion corporations are asking the government to come in and step in to regulate the use of AI because they fear what it can do. If we talk about AI, we talk about artwork, we talk about everything in life has a little bit of AI that's going to be in it and eventually take over some other things. So things have to be done. Comic companies right now, they get shamed when they use AI. People on the internet shame them. How dare you? You have artists out there working. They're being very protective. The same thing with Hollywood. Part of the strike was the idea that AI would come in and they would scan this person and that would be it. Salma Hayek did that great Black Mirror episode where she was part of an AI system.
Yeah.
It was a well-written episode because it actually was what's going to happen in the next couple of years. In comics, it's like anything. It's a tool. And I think people without skills, when they use tools, make terrible things. And people with skills, when they use tools, make great things. I personally find it like, I get it. It's like a cheat hack, especially with comic art. You're never going to get what you can out of an illustrator, no matter how many sentences you write. It has a familiarity in style. So we look at things and we see that's AI. But again, it's going to change. So I think the future is not looking great with most businesses because of AI, with entertainment businesses, with AI. Medical field, fantastic. I love AI. It's, the idea that my bracelet will have not only everything I've ever had wrong with me, but be able to tell everything that's going on in my body. That's a brilliant thing. There's a lot of AI used everywhere. As far as art and film and stuff, it's going to be a battle for the next whatever years. To try to regulate it on some level. There is no quick answer. I read all this stuff about AI and I'm just like, how many books have we read where, it's all about that years ago? Yeah. The warning of robots, the classic Bradbury stuff. We're going to have to deal with all that as it goes, as technology grows. We're already seeing it with campaigns with fake videos. There's fakes this, there's fakes that. People saying things they never said, and now they can imitate people's voices in your family to call you to get money out of you. It's very dangerous. Yeah. But as far as comics and everything, I think it's going to be used as a shortcut for studios because they think they're going to save money. In the long run, I don't know where that's going to go, but I do think it is a threat for a lot of different creative businesses. And again, the layman, the average person that just reads a comic, the average person just goes see a TV show or a movie. They don't even realize how much it already is in there already. They have all these sci-fi movies are all filmed in a room, and that's only going to get better. Forget about a room full of screens. Eventually it's going to be one room that has everything, 360. And, I don't think it's the brightest future. But I think the people that know how to use it and creative with it are going to have some fun visualizing things we've never seen. But I don't know. Craig, what do you think? What's your...
I think the greatest drawback of AI is that it's only as good as the programmer.
Right.
It can only do what it's been taught to do. To me, that's like anti-creative. So my vote is stick with people. Because, if it's a collaboration, don't you want your collaborator to come up with something new and original to help the whole project along? I mean, one example I have in my life, I had a brother-in-law who worked in electronics warfare early on with computers. And, he was all the super top secret, everything, leading edge. And he came up to me one day and he had the small kind of an iPad thing. And he said, look at this, look at this. And it was tic-tac-toe. It was that far long ago. And he said, try to beat the machine. And it's not that I was brilliant, but what happened was, I started playing and then I did the loser move so that he could jump me. And none of their brilliant scientist programmers had ever thought about anybody playing a loser move. So it wasn't in there and I beat him. And it was like, that's what I see happening with AI now is the loser move. You're only as good as the algorithm.
Right. But a programmer will figure that out. That's the thing about technology. The speed of technology, the growth of technology is the fastest growing thing. There's whole books about the science of technology, how it's just outpacing us as human beings, right? What they discover and what they're coming up with. And again, it's like anything. Things can either be used as a weapon or they could be used to help people. We're using AI in reproduction. We're using it in farms. We're using it in all these things. I don't want to demonize it, but I agree that AI has no soul. The art has no soul. There's no core. There's no spontaneity in the AI. They could fake it. Look, eventually there'll be robot people and then they can fake all that. I just think, like I said, I think it should be regulated. I think Hollywood had the right idea about making sure it was in the contracts. I think if comics had a union, I would tell them to unionize and say, if you use AI, we're shutting you down. But for now, we have to just shame them on the internet. That's the only power we have until we get. But I do think it's dangerous in certain fields, and I think it's brilliant in others. I think all the AI stuff in cars and ships and the technology to protect people on airplanes and all that stuff. There's a lot of stuff that it does good. But with creative people, I think we'd see the pushback on Instagram, and I don't know, my feed is full of people throwing paint at a canvas and coming up with crazy stuff. And I always look at it and I'm like, yeah, that's an artist, man. That's somebody. How do you do that? And I think that's always going to be there, Yeah. But I think some people are going to use it like a tool, and some studios see it as a way to save money because, let's be honest, greed is the motivation for company, not for the artists, but the people that the artists work for. It's greed. And if something's going to make them money, they're going to jump on it right away.
Yeah. Well, I can't say I disagree with anything that you guys have said. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about some of the independent stuff that you guys have made. I know that you do a lot on Kickstarter, Indiegogo. Can you talk about how you guys have found a way to have successful Kickstarters and independent campaigns to raise the money for this? And then also what it takes to promote a work like that? Because obviously if you've got something with Image or with Marvel or DC, they're going to have their teams behind it, marketing it and getting it out there. But how do you guys get little stories like what you two are creating together out into the world to where people can actually see it?
Yeah, it's difficult. So part of a career is these days is be doing things like this, where you put your face out there and you talk about what you do, you share your experience. People have YouTube channels. I have Instagram and X I use. We have a website. So you have to constantly promote yourself, your name, because remember, companies want to promote characters and IP. They're not interested in the creators' names. They're interested in the IP and promoting the actual books and stuff like that. So you have to start promoting yourself. You have to get yourself out there. And that is the key to when Kickstarter first started, I was the first professional comic book person to use the Kickstarter page to try to crowdfund a book. And the first 2 or 3, I learned so much stuff. I learned what not to do. I learned about postage and weight and shipping and media mail. What's media mail versus regular mail? And I had to learn so much stuff. And I've done 23, I think, since. And part of that is it's put it this way, there's no straightaway on my path to learning. It's one big curve that keeps going for miles. And and I'm learning up until today. I mean, I'm still learning new stuff. We do a campaign like Fantasema that's out now. It ends in a week, but we do a campaign like that, and we keep pushing and pushing, and we get a new person each day or two, a couple of people a day, and then I watch somebody else launch something that I never heard of that makes $1 million in one day, and I'm like blown away. I'm like, how did they do this? And I learned that it's because that guy's out there on YouTube every day creating an army of people that are ready to buy his stuff. So there's so much more than just doing the product these days. You have to sell yourself. You have to put your face on it. You have to go out there and talk with people. We do conventions all over the world. Amanda and I go all over Europe. We've been everywhere. There's New Zealand, everywhere, promoting our work, putting our face on things. And it's nonstop. It is nonstop. It's part of the business. But with crowdfunding, if you're a smaller person, you're not well known, but you're going to do a book and you're going to put it out, even if it's a 22-page book, just understand that your family and your friends are your army. And you need to call all the favors in to go out there to promote it and on their social media. And you need to find people on social media with the same interests as you and follow them and interact with them and speak with them and then talk up your work. And then you got to, if the art comes in or you're drawing it or you get art, to put panels up and talk about it. And promotion is not only during the time you're doing your Kickstarter, it's all year round. It's not about a story in the Hollywood Reporter. That's great, but I had a story in the Hollywood Reporter and I looked up how many people backed my campaign after it for a week, and it was only like 30. And I'm like, okay, that went to everyone in the world, right? But then I did something on the X and I talked about something and all of a sudden I had 30 backers that day. So you don't know, but you have to put yourself out there and talk about everything. And it's exhausting. You can hear it in my voice. It's exhausting.
And I mention also that when you're doing the Kickstarter, what Jimmy always does, if you quickie background on Kickstarters, you offer your product and people make pledges to back you, which typically funds your product. Once you've hit your goal, you have stretch goals. Mm-hmm. And I think Jimmy's focus on quality doesn't stop with the story and the colors and the inks and all that. The first stretch goal of Fantasema was he puts better, higher quality, heavier stock paper and a heavier stock cover on the book. So the physical product gets a boost once with the first stretch goal. And the second stretch goal was spot glossing on the cover. And this was, you take like, we'll say a figure on the cover, and that's going to be glossy where the rest of the cover is matte. And so it really pops and stands out. So the quality doesn't stop with the story of the book. It's the actual physical product.
Yeah, we're tactile people, right? We like to hold things. We like to feel of things. But we also offer a digital level because obviously people in New Zealand, people in all over the world, they can't afford shipping. Right now to ship a book to London is like, $28, and the book itself is not even near that, the price. So we offer a levels for a very reasonable price because this Kickstarter is 3 books. Mm-hmm. So we made it $15. You can, and it's right in your email. It's a PDF. You own it. You own it. You can put it on your iPad. You can keep it on your computer. It doesn't come back to us. You get it. You own it forever. You probably bootleg it and send it to friends. I don't care. It has its own life, But you make sure you're offering something for everybody. You make sure it's reasonably priced. And my reputation on Kickstarter, I mean, it's, everyone's gotten everything they've ever backed. But it's used. Kickstarter is used to 2 things: test an idea. So I put out a cover and say, this is a book I'm going to do. Are you interested in this? And it's like picking up pre-sales. I'm answering some Laura on there. It is pre-sales, and you hope you hit the amount you're asking, which is usually basically to cover all the expenses. And then from there, anything after that is profit, and again, stretch goals, like Craig mentioned, or just to get people excited, because somebody who may have backed our Kickstarter in the beginning thinking they will only get 1 book. By the time the stretch goals are done, they're not only getting the book and some other stuff, they're also getting digital books, because we keep giving away stuff on a stretch goal. So I give a lot of digital books out. And it's another thing. I think that these crowdfunding are also in its peak right now, meaning something else is going to come along or some other way is going to do it. But for now, Kickstarter and all these formats are the best way to kickstart your idea. But you have to make sure you have a lot of people that believe in what you're doing. And that includes family and friends. And if you're Italian and you have 400 cousins, that's great. Put in the work.
How do you feel about variant covers? I see a lot of people going like hog wild and having like 8 different covers for their book. I know that comes into play with like collectors. They really like to have the different covers. Do you find that is like a big selling point on your on your crowdsourcing Kickstarters?
So with our campaign, we're selling to 2 or 3 different people. We're selling to collectors. We're selling to people that love Jimmy and Craig comics. We're selling to people that like Pierre Brito's artwork. We're selling to people that like Jungle Girl action type Tarzan type genre stuff. We're also selling, we have my wife has a level that's 3 covers of hers. So we're selling to her fans. So we're not just selling to the one person. So I want to make sure there's something for collectible people who collect comics, who love bagging them, boarding them, having limited editions. I also want to make sure it's for people who want to read the book. And then for our collectors, we offer different covers. So we're selling it to a whole bunch of people. It's not just a small group, because the people who buy the digital levels, 2 things. They're usually out of the country, or they just want to read the book because they like the art or the story or whatever. When they buy the physical copies and they're buying something like a chase copy or a special edition cover, that's usually the collector, the person that may read the book, may not read the book, may buy it to resell it. Because with our Kickstarters, we only print what's ordered. We don't overprint it by 10,000. We literally print 10% more to cover damages. So a lot of the books we've done, like Pop Kill and stuff, they go for over $1,000, some of the books in the secondary market, because there's only 100 of them, but there's only 150 of them. So there is another collector aspect that I love about it, because I'm a comic collector, but I also understand the loyalty of, we're only going to print 10% over. Because I have more people ask me, hey, do you have this book? And I said, it's sold out. You have to go to Amazon or eBay to find it. And then they yell at me, it's too expensive. And I said, well, if you back the Kickstarter, it was only $30. You could have bought it.
Get in next time.
Yeah, you don't waste time. So a lot of that is, it's just understanding what the market's looking for. At the end of the day, it's the story Craig and I created that I want them to buy. But not everybody buys a car to get around. Some people buy a car to look good in it. Some people buy a car because they like, ridiculous as it may seem, they love the stereo system, or they love the color, and
the cup
people
holder.
buy things for different reasons, and we have to appeal to all of them. People buy a house for a view, or they buy a house because they like the kitchen. We watch. How many times you watch those house shows that people walk in a house, beautiful house, and they go, I don't like the carpet, and I'm yelling at the screen, get new carpet.
Yeah.
But
Right.
but their brain
just sold our house. I went through that.
Yeah. So, but the brain can't even process that, and that they're hyper focusing on something they can literally change in 3 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mark Kelly asked in the Q&A, do writers have to create their own original lead character to get into the industry? What are your thoughts on that?
If you want to write Spider-Man, you should read a lot of Spider-Man and then pitch a Spider-Man story. If you want to create your own character, then you have to create your own character. But most of the comic companies, if you want to write for them, they already have their characters. So you're going to be writing their characters. So you have to be familiar with them. You don't need an original thing unless that's what you want to do. It's 2 or 3 different jobs right there.
And if they had an original thing, is it best for them to pitch like one of those small indie publishers, comic publishers, or like at what point in somebody's career do you think it makes sense for them to do a Kickstarter and try to just launch their own comic if they have no network and platform?
So if you're like a movie, if you're a film, if you're an indie filmmaker, makes small movies, but Jennifer Aniston is your friend and she's going to be in it, then there's a whole different animal that happens, right? Then all of a sudden everybody's wanting to buy it. So if you're a writer that has new work or never done anything, but you have a Jim Lee or somebody that's a big name writing it, drawing it, then you could probably get it into places that you couldn't get, and vice versa. Sometimes artists a famous artist wants to just get a new writer that they like and bring them in. If you're starting from scratch, you're going to probably have to go for small indie companies, or again, crowdfund it and print it yourself. And there's a million videos on YouTube on how to do that. So I would say YouTube's a great source. Type in any question you want, you're going to find somebody talking about it.
Yeah. And how much does an average illustrator cost? I mean, because that's the other thing. It's like when
I dropped my wedding ring.
Like when you're when you're writing a screenplay or you're writing a novel, you're just putting words on a page. It doesn't cost you anything. But writing a comic, if you want to get this illustrator, you're like you said before, you have to put money into it. How much should people expect?
So
the range,
middle road, 500 a page. Middle for me, somebody I would be happy with. You can get it cheaper, and you get what you pay for. You can pay more money, and you might get what you pay for. But I'm saying $400 to $500 is
okay.
I think it's an average thing. I know Spike paid a lot less for his.
Yeah, but you get what you pay for.
But you get what you pay for.
I mean, here's the thing:
it's like the guy that comes over to paint your house and says, "I'll do it for $100." You kind of know what you're gonna get,
I mean, those are some seriously professional rates right there. I mean, the people that I was looking for on Reddit and on Facebook, I mean, they were advertising anywhere between $70 to $120 a page, and that's for lines, that's for pencils and maybe inks. But then you're adding colors on top of that, then you're adding letters. I mean, I was averaging, like when I was pricing out my book, I was looking at like $200 a page total. I could never afford $400 to $500 a page to make an indie book.
Yeah, so it comes down to you're gonna get a kid out of high school or college, or you're gonna get a professional.
Right.
So when you hire a professional, you know what you're getting. You're gonna have to pay a little more for it. When you're hiring somebody new, look, they might come through for you, and it might be the greatest experience. Don't get me wrong; a lot of people start that way. You went to South America and found a guy that would do it a little cheaper. I mean, again, I'm giving you the average in comics.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say 400 is the middle part, and this is without offering ownership. Mm-hmm. This is like a buyout. Like you're hiring the person, you own the company. Now you can negotiate when you say to them, hey, I'll give you 15, 20% of it, or 50%, or whatever you want to give. Then you can negotiate those numbers down. But that's going to be based on the interest they have, because they might be like, I'm not going to I want the most money I can get. I don't want to own this. This isn't going anywhere, or, I'm just not in that space yet. So it's different every time. But I think that if you sit with like 400 a page, that's pencils, inks, colors, and lettering.
That was my question. Yeah. So
that's like the whole ship. Right. And that's average. I'm not talking, that's not anybody in comics that's working at Marvel and DC, by the way. That's higher.
Yeah.
Okay. But you can find those people, and you can find cheaper people, and if they're willing to do it, great. It's like anything. You can have 5 people give you a price on your kitchen, and they're going to be all over the map. You're just going to have to base it on what they do, how their work is, and you have to do a little research on them, like you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. We should probably do some speed lightning round. Some questions. Mark asked, how does a new writer get a chance to pitch a story to DC Comics?
They have to know somebody, make their name in another, whether it's a novel or an actor or a screenwriter, but have to be sort of famous already. You have to have, they don't randomly take people, and they don't take pitches. So these comic companies don't take pitches. They ask you for the work. So if you're somebody's assistant and they walk you through the door, if you work for another writer, and they walk you through the door, great, somebody will look at it. But honestly, it's really tough. It's really, really tough. They're not sitting around looking for new writers, by the way. They're looking for people they can hire for cheap. They spend a lot of time on that, but they're not looking. They say they're looking for new writers, but a lot of times they're just trying to fill quotas. I hate to say that out loud, but sometimes they're looking for this person or that kind of person. Because these are corporations. They have to answer to a board or a bunch of people. If it's a smaller company, then you have to hope you can pitch a story or pitch an idea, bring one visual. So I'm going to tell every writer, look, if you have a great story you want to pitch, spend the money, save up that $500-600, hire a great artist to do a visual for it, and then present the one-page pitch with a visual to all the smaller companies and hope for the best. But it's really tough. Because, it's tough. It's just really tough.
In the world of children's illustration, like kids' books, they can submit to an agent the book with the illustration if the writer is also the illustrator, or just the text, and then the publisher will find the illustrator. How does that work in the comic world in terms of pitching? If you don't have any illustrations, do you have to have that the one page you were talking about, or could a writer just pitch?
It's really tough because it's a visual medium. It's like asking a director to pitch without showing them a film. It doesn't make sense. So it's a visual medium. The comic companies want to see a visual tied to your pitch. So you might have to hire an artist or somebody, or find somebody online to create. Hey, you know what? Get that AI out and plug it in there and see what you can come out with. But they want to see something visual. The people have been the thing with comics are, if you can draw and you're great, you're going to get work tomorrow. Okay. You literally, if you can produce and you're a fantastic artist. I was down in Costa Rica. Amanda and I did a signing in Costa Rica, and this guy, John Timms, came up to me with a portfolio, and he worked in advertising, but he said, I always wanted to draw comics. And he showed me his portfolio. I flipped through. In 2 weeks, he was our regular artist on Harley Quinn.
Wow.
Because the artist, I saw the art, and I'm like, how quick can you do it? He goes, a page a day. I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting you work. And I got him work. He's been working ever since. He's a contract guy now at DC at Warner Brothers.
Wow.
But writers are different, right? Writers are like, who's going to read that one-page script? And we're all crazy. Writers say their stuff out loud and other people steal it. Writers throw their ideas around. And, even with the poor man's copyright, people, we've all run into this where people have the same, I had that idea. And I always say, you can't, ideas are like these invisible things over your head. They're all there. People just have to grab and reach down, and whoever reaches down and is able to sell it first wins. But it's a crazy visual, but it's harder for artists to get in the business. You have to create. Look, if you have a YouTube channel where you're talking and reviewing things, and you have a name, if you pitch and you have a name, the company looks. By the way, everybody that works for Marvel and DC, the company looks at their social media, by the way. That's part of your into the job. They look at not only how many followers you have, but how much of an ass you've been, and that has everything to do with them hiring. So your social media, by the way, this is the new thing. I mean, it is, when you sign a contract for these companies, they have a thing about social media where you're not allowed to do this, and you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to show this. So you have to understand, and I think Spike was talking about this earlier in another show, that you have to watch how you are every day, because it comes back to haunt you, and it will, because the company will see you're too political, so they won't hire you. You're too much this, you're too much that. You attack people online, you diss movies. I didn't like that movie, this guy sucks, he's a terrible director. Guess what? You're working for a company where, all of a sudden you're working for a company where that's their main director. And somebody pulls that quote up, and guess what that is? You're a PR nightmare all of a sudden. Guess what they don't need in their lives? PR nightmares. So again, a lot of times you have to be creative about how you're going to get in with your work. But if you have, social media is so important these days. I can't stress it enough. And don't worry if you don't have the face or you don't look like a model. People don't remember the models. They remember the people that look unique. Okay? I'm going to say this. I say it a million times. The pretty people are great, but they usually, there's a lot of pretty people. The people that have a unique voice, if you have a unique voice with your work, your way of looking at things and being a positive force out there, good things come when you're that positive force.
That's awesome. So we're a little bit over time, so I just want to leave the audience with a final question to both of you. If you could go back in time when you started writing comics, like what do you wish you knew back then? Like what's your advice to those people who are, whether they've got just the prose or the prose and the illustration, and they're trying to get that first break? Like, what's your advice to them?
Always use a contract. That's mine.
How about you, Craig?
Study what everybody else is doing. Know more about what you want to achieve.
That's good. I say don't follow trends. set your own, write what you know, and do not talk about yourself in a negative or a down way. Don't even play that game where I could have been. Don't play the game. Be proud of what you do, and give out confidence about what you do. Don't keep telling yourself you're not smart enough or you're not good enough, because eventually you're going to believe it and you won't get anything done.
Jimmy
Yeah,
ending with fire advice.
That is awesome. Yeah, I agree. And, we always say to people all the time about social media, like, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Like, I usually, if I want to say something, I'll like type it and then I'll stop and say, who cares what I think about that? And I just back it up and just move on with my day.
Yeah, politics, man. Politics.
Oh,
I have plenty to say about it, but everything
yeah.
I say, every time I say it, people attack me from both ends. And I'm like, you know what? I don't need to talk about politics. Let me talk about how wonderful this book I read is. Well, what great TV show I'm watching. Look, there's a lot of people out there that make money doing just that, being negative. But it's hard to switch that switch later on when you're known for that. So I like to think of us as one big family, and everybody's trying to work hard and do their thing. So be supportive of other people. Understand what they're going through. Empathy is such a great word and such a great thing, but actually look it up and understand it, what it means. Don't just say it. There's a great video about empathy that I want to say her name's Blair. God, I'm trying to think of her name. I can't think of it. There's a video about
I'll try to find it and put it in the recording email.
Yeah, I think it's like Blair. I want to say Blair Brown, but I don't. Oh, somebody wrote it. Brene.
Oh yeah. Oh, Breen Brown.
Brene Brown. So she has some videos on YouTube. I would say go watch those videos, because it talks about behavior and how people act and everything, and it's really helpful to learn that stuff, because again, it really helps your writing. Because again, everybody can't be in our voice. We have to write different people who we may not agree with or may not understand their lives, but we have to keep it authentic. And that's part of it, is to, understand what they're going through and have empathy for that. So there's some great videos there by her.
And Dustin said, glad I did this. I got to get less political. You can delete tweets. Just go and delete everything.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the politics are, they have a lot. Media has a lot invested in keeping us fighting with each other. There's a lot of money invested in that. Because if we're getting along, guess what we don't do? We don't watch TV and we don't watch the news. If we're getting along and having a good time, we don't care who's running. We're just like doing our own things. So there's a lot invested to get you to fight each other and to keep your face glued. So you have to watch the news every time it's on. I'm going to miss some news. And let's be honest, anybody that goes on vacation for more than a week or two in another country realizes how unimportant all that crap is. So just understand it's another kind of manipulation.
Yeah, it is. Well, thank you guys so much for doing this. This was incredibly helpful. I hope the audience really loved it. And I will get you guys the recording email probably tomorrow. But I also want to put a little plug in for our next symposium set. We're actually doing a two-parter the week of March 25th about indie filmmaking, like a two-part crash course, everything from script to distribution. So that'll be a fun one. It's our first time trying a two-parter, so that'll be fun. We've got a lot of other good stuff coming up. And then watch for, I'll put a link in there for our unpublished contest where you can enter your comic. Anyway, so thank you so much. And we will see all you guys soon at the next symposium.
Symposium is brought to you by Pipeline Artists, a division of Pipeline Media Group. To learn more about upcoming live symposiums, visit symposium.pipelineartists.com and follow us on Twitter @PipelineArtists.